Have you ever truly wondered how the clothes you wear, the buildings you live in, and the very idea of a job came to be? It wasn't always like this. Imagine a world lit only by the sun and candles, a world where work meant farming a small plot of land or crafting something beautiful with your own hands, right inside your quiet home. This was the world before the age of machines. In places like England, even before giant factories shadowed the sky, there was a system called proto-industrialization. This sounds complex, but it just meant merchants would travel to the countryside, giving raw wool to peasant families. The whole family, sitting by the hearth, would spin yarn and weave cloth. Their faces, calm and focused, showed the concentration of their craft. They worked on their own time, mixing it with their farm work. It was a slow, quiet process, woven into the rhythm of the seasons. But in India, the story was different, and perhaps even grander. Long before the British set foot on its shores, India was the world's textile powerhouse. The name calico itself came from Calicut. Fine Indian cotton and silks were treasured across the globe, from Persia to Europe. Ports like Surat on the coast of Gujarat and Hubli in Bengal were bustling gateways, filled with ships and the sounds of merchants from around the world. These ports connected Indian weavers to the globe. Indian merchants and bankers financed this trade, creating a vast, wealthy network. It was a time of immense skill and pride. A single weaver could create art that machines today would struggle to copy. Their hands moved with a practiced, fluid grace, a skill passed down through countless generations. Their faces showed a quiet confidence. They were masters of their craft, respected and independent. But a shadow was stretching across the ocean. The English East India Company arrived, not just as traders, but as future rulers. As they gained political power, first in Bengal after the Battle of Plassey, everything began to change. They wanted to control the weavers, to own the entire supply chain. They systematically eliminated the old merchants and brokers who used to give weavers fair advances and bargain for their cloth. In their place, they appointed a new agent, the Gomasta. The Gomasta was an outsider paid by the company who often marched into villages with soldiers known as peons. His face was stern, showing no empathy. He forced the weavers to accept loans, binding them to produce cloth only for the company, often at prices that were far too low. The weavers lost their freedom. They could no longer sell their best cloth to the highest bidder, or even weave for their own families. They were trapped. Weavers who took the loan were forbidden from selling to anyone else. The price they received was pitifully low. Clashes became common. Suddenly, one machine could do the work of 100 spinners. Giant smoke-belching factories, called mills, sprang up in cities like Manchester. These factories could produce huge quantities of cheap, strong thread and cloth faster than any human hand. The faces of the workers there, often children, were smudged with soot, their expressions tired. The age of the machine had truly begun, and this machine-made cloth needed a market. Where better than India, with its millions of people now under British control? Manchester goods began to flood Indian markets. This cloth was cheap, often rough, but it was relentless. The patient, hand-woven art of the Indian weaver couldn't compete with the price of the machine. The weavers and spinners, who had survived the Gomastas, now faced a new enemy, the factory. Their looms fell silent, one by one. This was the deindustrialization of India, a painful silence that settled over entire weaving villages. Their faces showed deep worry and hopelessness as they looked at their useless looms. The bustling ports of Surat and Hooghly, once symbols of Indian prosperity, faded into memory. Their docks rotted, the great trading houses empty. In their place, new cities rose, cities built by the British for their own trade, Bombay and Calcutta. These ports faced the world, shipping raw cotton out of India to feed the mills in Manchester, and bringing finished cloth back in. The entire economy was being rewired to serve a foreign master. But Indians were not just victims, they were also builders. As the 19th century progressed, a new dream took root. Indian entrepreneurs saw the power of the machine and wanted to build their own future. In 1854, the first Indian-owned cotton mill opened in Bombay, started by Kauji Nanabhoi Davar. Soon after, jute mills, often owned by British interests but employing Indian labor, sprang up along the Hooghly River in Bengal. Building these mills was a struggle. Indian owners had to fight for space in a market dominated by British goods and controlled by British banks. They faced discrimination. They were often forced to produce rougher yarn, not for clothing, but for the handloom weavers who still managed to survive in the villages or for export to China. But where did the workers for these new mills come from? They were the people pushed out of the countryside. They were farmers whose lands were gone, artisans whose crafts were worthless, and weavers whose looms were silent. They flooded into the new cities like Bombay and Calcutta, searching for any work they could find. Their faces were a mix of hope and anxiety. Life in the city was hard. Workers were crammed into chawls, small, overcrowded tenement buildings. The noise of the machines was deafening, the air thick with cotton dust. Women and children worked alongside men, facing the same dangers for even less pay. Yet they found community. They gathered in akaras to wrestle, celebrated festivals together, and when conditions became unbearable, they learned to strike, to fight for their rights. Their faces, united in protest, showed a new, defiant strength. Even as the factories grew, the handloom sector did not die. The surviving weavers were clever. They adapted. Their faces showed resilience. They started using mill-spun yarn, which was cheaper, and began weaving specialized items that machines couldn't easily make, like saris with intricate borders, or the famous lungis of Madras. Their resilience was a quiet form of resistance, keeping a vital craft alive. Then, in the early 20th century, a new idea swept the nation: Swadeshi. As the nationalist movement grew, leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak called for a boycott of all foreign goods. People gathered in massive bonfires, their faces illuminated by the flames, their expressions full of patriotic fervor as they threw in their Manchester cloth. Suddenly, the demand for Indian-made goods soared. This gave a huge boost to Indian mills, and for a time, brought new life back to the handloom weavers. The First World War also changed things, as British mills turned to war production, opening up the entire Indian market to local industries. The age of industrialization was not one single story. It was a time of genius and cruelty, of vast new wealth and terrible new poverty. It was the roar of the steam engine and the silence of the abandoned loom. It created the modern world, but it did so on the backs of millions, from the crowded alleys of Manchester to the quiet villages of India. And the echoes of that transformation, the choices made, the lives broken and rebuilt are still with us today, woven into the very fabric of our world.